Hello, everyone, and welcome to Advocacy Café Chat number 4. This is our fourth and final in the series for Advocacy Month 2022. If you haven't heard or joined us for an Advocacy Café Chat yet this month, welcome. These are an informal conversation at the end of each week, hosted by our panel of 3 incredible advocates coming from 3 different chronic disease communities. Each one is unique in their backgrounds and talents. This week, we'll be discussing local and state advocacy with some of our guests from EmPOWER M.E Roundtable yesterday are joining us as well. So I'll just do a quick round of introductions. First, we have Sarah Ramey, a musician and writer who's been featured in the Paris Review, NPR, and so many others, can't even name them. She's received an MFA in creative nonfiction writing from Columbia University and was a writer for President Obama's 2008 campaign. Sarah has been living with pain and chronic illness for 17 years and authored her first book, which is a darkly funny memoir called The Lady's Handbook for Her Mysterious Illness. Welcome, Sarah. Next, we have Cynthia Adinig, a marketing specialist and an equity policy advisor. She sits on the board of Solve M.E and is a person with long COVID, also a fellow policy nerd. She's spent over a decade engaged in community service, focused on low-income communities of color. She has been a campaign manager and policy advisor to several political campaigns and uses her knowledge to advocate for both the ME/CFS and long COVID communities. Thank you so much from all of us, and welcome, Cynthia Adinig. Last but most certainly not least, we have the lovely Sarah Tompkins, an Ehlers-Danlos syndrome patient advocate and Miss Wheelchair Washington USA 2022. Sarah is a passionate advocate for invisible illness and disabilities, and with countless other communities. She's also partnered with the Rare Disease Legislative Advocates, and you may actually recognize her from last year's EmPOWER M.E Roundtable. Welcome so much, Sarah Tompkins. And as I mentioned before, joining us today are some members of the EmPOWER M.E panel from yesterday, where we focused on state and local advocacy. We all hear that politics is local, but these folks are really proven exactly where you can make a huge difference locally. So actually, just before we get started, if the panel from yesterday would like to introduce yourselves really quickly, and we'll dive right in. Charmian, you're up on first on my Hollywood Squares, if you would like to kick us off.
Okay, my name is Charmian Proskauer. I am from Massachusetts, and I'm here representing the Massachusetts ME/CFS and Fibromyalgia Association.
Melinda, would you like to go next?
Hi, I'm Melinda Lipscomb, co-chair and co-founder of the ME Action Maryland State Chapter.
Welcome, Melinda. And Laura.
Hi, I'm Laura Bucholtz. I'm in Florida and I'm the Florida State lead for ME Action and for Solve. My husband's been disabled by ME/CFS for 10 years. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Laura, for joining us. And Art, and then Suzanne.
Yeah, hi, I'm Art Mirin from California. I'm the lead of the California chapter of ME Action.
And I'm Suzanne Wheeler. I'm from Minnesota. I'm co-founder and current president of the Minnesota ME/CFS Alliance. And I have ME/CFS myself.
Welcome to all of you and to our special panel. I'm so excited for this conversation to continue. So there was one question that we didn't get to ask you yesterday. And so actually, I'd like to ask this to all of our panelists. How did you get started in advocacy? What were your first lessons learned when you were just beginning?
I'll start. So my advocacy actually started when I was 18, just graduating from high school. And it was with in the cancer field with the American Cancer Society. I come from a cancer family where any type of cancer that you can imagine on my paternal side. We're an old school mining family, so it's genetic and environmental, and then the environment turns into genetic changes type thing. And after watching my grandfather die in silence with liver cancer, I made a vow that I wouldn't let that happen. So as soon as I was able to get in and start doing, what I could, I walked into the local ACS office here and said, how can I help? And because of my tenacity, and because I don't like to take no for any kind of answer, they put me right into recruiting and fundraising and federal advocacy. And with that, we brought Relay for Life was just starting. This was in 1996. And Relay for Life had happened for the very first time. And then they were trying to bring it out to the regional ACS offices. And since we have, one right here in Baltimore, we brought Relay for Life to Maryland, and I helped grow that into, my gosh, at the time when I had to stop doing it, we had 20 different local relays around, and then the really, really big one that was done and had just started the school program. And then I got sick and couldn't do it anymore. And actually it was my last relay that I did was right when I collapsed and ended up bedridden. I had a surgery in 2015 that was supposed to cure me of all the virus and flu issues that I've been having for the past couple of years. And they were going to reconstruct my throat and take all the stuff out that was supposedly causing harm. And instead it was a sentence to my bed. And it was Relay for Life that night. That Monday I went to work, collapsed at work, and then I was done. And being bedbound for 6 months, just trying to figure out what was going on and finding stuff. That was when I found the first Millions Missing, finding stuff online and getting involved in that. And when I said, wait, I know I can use my voice through that, I found the Solve community and federal advocacy days and said, oh, I've done this before. I can do this again. And joined in with Solve and doing federal advocacy in 2017. Yeah, 2017 was the first year.
And we're so happy to have you every year since. Thank you so much. It's been such an amazing journey together. Does anyone else want to share about kind of your early advocacy lessons or experiences, or kind of what inspired you? Oh, Sarah.
Yes, I would love to share. So I had to become a patient advocate when symptoms began in high school. But after 9 years of really advocating for different specialists, finally got diagnosed by my geneticist. But just a few days later, I had my first support group meeting where I met my late best friend, Kelly. And she really taught me how to use my voice. Let's say I was a little too uncomfortable being self-validating in my diagnoses, especially in those appointment settings with doctors. And if they weren't taking a symptom or issue seriously, I would just sort of say, you're probably right, or really not move the ball any more than that. And she would explain the noisy wheel gets heard. If you have to, she'll be way more explicit than I was ever able to be. But I loved that energy of, I know my body best and I know my experience best. And if you don't understand, it just means you don't understand my condition. It doesn't mean you don't understand me necessarily. Just see, she depersonalized that a lot for me and really helped me form that attitude of no one can speak as well for you as you can and can advocate for your needs as well as you can. And you really have to step up to that plate. And she was actually on her way to the NIH for a clinical study when she passed away unexpectedly and too soon. But because she had Ehlers-Danlos, POTS, dysautonomia, post-viral syndrome issues, and just weren't able to connect those puzzle pieces. And when she got sick on her way there and passed unexpectedly, it really lit my torch for understanding that there was so much education, awareness, and advocacy that needed to happen across the board to every industry and every community group that I could think of. And just knowing that we're getting the word out and other patient communities know about our patient populations and different diseases and sister diseases, I feel is such a strengthening in our community. It's just been fantastic to see because we have such wonderful powers in numbers. Thanks. Great question.
Couldn't agree more. Wow. And thank you for sharing your story about your friend. That is so touching and so inspiring that you've taken so much from that experience.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Oh, what a heartbreaking story. I mean, a lot of our, everyone's advocacy journey really kind of starts with this hard story. yeah, I mean, my husband, we were out in San Francisco, both graphic designers, kind of living the life that we dreamed of for ourselves. He was, poised to become creative director at this great design firm, like doing graphic design for Coca-Cola and everything. And he was just shot out of the sky. He was just, he went from that to in bed the whole day. And so I started my journey when, it was years where we really didn't understand what was going on. And then we stumbled into Jen Brea's TED Talk, and then my head exploded and my world came crashing down. And, and then I understood the scope of the injustice, basically. And so that understanding the scope of what is actually going on, like, I just wanted to burn the world down. So, and that feeling hasn't waned all that much, really, from 5 or 6 years ago to now. Yeah, and so I found M.E. Action, and then, soon thereafter found Solve. It was at the time when, there were no state groups. So I spoke with Ben at M.E. Action. He kind of laid out what I could do there. So it was like, that just felt like low-lying fruit to me, to start that group, because I had plans to do a million other things. And at that time, it was just before the first DC day. So Emily was on the phone with me trying to recruit me to do that. So I met Emily early on. And so I got a lot of guidance through Emily as well, learning how to, advocate in that way. And then so I also, I got my bearings in the beginning as an advocate by getting anybody I could on the phone, I don't want to name names so that they don't get 100 calls, but a lot of, generous people gave me their time, and I sort of understood the landscape, and, from there did what I could do and started to practice with legislation and everything. And yeah, until I got my feet under me. And then here we are with a big Florida group and some successful legislation and everything, and we're still going. So yeah, that's how I got into this.
Congrats, Laura. I still remember that first phone call, and I was working late at the office, and it was such a brightness to my day when we chatted, and I love the fact that you felt supported and comfortable in taking these steps, and that's what I aim for with all the folks I work with. So that just warms my heart. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is anyone next? Yeah, I was gonna say thank you, Suzanne.
Yeah, sure. My background is U.S. Army. I was a helicopter pilot for a decade, and then I went into corporate America and ran a team of SEIU Local 26 facility service workers, about 3,500 cleaners that were within my watch. And as a part of that job, we employed disabled adults, quite a few of them, and so through a nonprofit called LifeWorks. So really my beginning advocacy work was through this nonprofit for disabled adults, and mostly in the fundraising world. And also I did quite a bit for the YWCA. And throughout that period, I was pretty sick. I got sick in 2002, late 2002, but wasn't diagnosed until 2017. When I finally got diagnosed, I went to a chronic pain meeting that was offered in the local community, and I found out about unrest. Because I knew that I had ME/CFS, but I'd never heard about it before. So I went home that afternoon immediately, and I watched the film and was just shocked that there was this massive community effort out there. And I immediately started Googling, millions missing, and got to one of the national websites, and in one of my chronic pain stupors, which I was having quite a bit at this point, I had had to leave my job and was pretty much homebound, 50% bedbound. And in one of those bad nights of pain, I signed up for a Millions Missing event, and thinking I was signing up to attend, and I accidentally signed up to run it. And so, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I got a call then. So then I started getting phone calls, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't sign up to run this. I don't know if I can. I'm like pretty much in bed. And, but I ended up meeting a couple of really great people, Lisa Aliotto, who's current vice president of our organization, and Leanne Barrel, who's the past president. And we all met for coffee and came together and started the first Millions Missing thing event in Minneapolis. So I didn't have to run it alone, thank goodness. But then we were brainstorming on let's try a nonprofit. So that's really how we started. And within 6 months, we had a nonprofit put together. My husband's an attorney with a large downtown law firm, and they agreed to do all the pro bono work to help get us started. And so it was just a blessing. As much as this illness is a big bummer, my life is so enriched with the people that I've met because of this illness. So that's really my start.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. Does anyone else want to share before we switch to the open conversation portion of the program? Oh, Cynthia.
Okay, you guys hear me? Okay, great. Wow, so my story is so interesting because I feel like I've met every single organization represented here in 2 years because of my story. So I'm a long hauler, and before I got sick, I was a graphic designer, marketing specialist, and working on political campaigns all at the same time, and of course volunteering in a bunch of nonprofits. I had a very busy schedule, and I was very, very fulfilled, living life to the fullest, enjoying every second of it. I've always been steeped in service and community. It's where I thrive and live. And so when I got sick, I noticed that there were some hurdles in the system that would make it really hard for other people to survive. And I was really, really concerned that we were missing people, that there was names we didn't know that we were losing unnecessarily. And I vowed that, in the hospital, as I was struggling with starvation, because I became allergic to all food from long COVID, I remember a night I was there, I think it was right before my upper endoscopy, before I truly knew I had long COVID, and I said to myself, if I make it on the other side, I'm going to make sure that this doesn't happen to anyone else. And after being admitted a few times and realizing that they still didn't believe anything was wrong with me, in spite of being admitted for starvation 4 times and losing like 40 pounds in like 5 months or something like that, and ended up in a wheelchair and bedridden for months. And no one seemed to care. No one seemed to care that I couldn't walk, that I went from walking to not walking, that I went from being able to, brush my hair and brush my child's hair to doing none of that and needing his help just to put my shoes on. And so I said, I have to do something. I have to do more. There's got to be something I can do from bed, from here. And what happened was one a scary night, I had low oxygen and my heart rate was up, and I went to the hospital and for treatment, and they turned me away, and they threatened to arrest me for seeking care. And I said, wow, if I was someone else, I would die tonight, or I could have become a hashtag that night. And that just propelled me even more to do more, to say more, to be around there. So I hit the ground running, trying to join as many organizations as I could, trying to do as much as I could to make sure that others wouldn't experience this. And so when the Washington Post article documented that's when the ME/CFS community came and found me, and they were like, hey, we can help you. We know what's going on. You have ME/CFS, and I had no idea what that was. And they really helped me to recover. And as they helped me to recover, and they told me the history of how they've been struggling for 30 years just for a tiny nod from the government or a tiny research or a tiny thing, I said, hey, you guys are the reason why I can walk and speak and why I'm here today. And you guys have helped me so much. I'm going to make sure that I never forget what was given to me. And so I've done as much ME/CFS advocacy ever since. I truly love them. And that's how I met Emily, how I met Charmian, how I met Ben, all the different organizations represented here. And I continue to I really carry the flag for ME/CFS because I feel like I really owe that community for being so sick. They're so sick, but they really work to get me well and in good space. And I'm truly thankful for that. And I hope to continue with advocacy for a very, very, very long time.
Thank you, Cynthia. We are so lucky to have you, and you have a brilliant policy mind, I will say, on top of all of that. So on top of your amazing advocacy work, I really have come to rely on you for your insights on policy. So thank you again for everything you do for our team and for our community. We are just so much love. And then Sarah, I see your hand is up. Would you like to share how you came into this space?
Yeah, so I was just going to share, I've had sort of just a quick story that actually came up in the last week with the ME Action event that they did. So I've done less sort of legislative and policy work, and my advocacy has been more, I'm a writer, and so I got sick in 2003, and so it was really in 2005 that I started using writing and like my little magnifying glass from my bed and like my murder wall of red string, trying to figure out what was going on, which is so common for all of us, especially I think, 20 years ago, that when so much less was known. But I felt that it was so important to use writing to make this invisible phenomenon that we all experience visible for other people, and not just my story, but the stories of all of us that we all share, because it's so similar. There's so many patterns that you see over and over and over again. And that led to me writing this book that I published that came out right at the beginning of the pandemic. But a story that got told this week that was so meaningful for me, for him to share this. So the writer Ed Yong at The Atlantic, who's done a lot of amazing reporting about the pandemic, but especially about long COVID. He is one of the first very serious mainstream journalists that he hasn't done not even a whiff of, well, some physicians believe this is real and some don't. He's just been a pure advocate from the beginning. This is real, this is important, this is a long neglected problem for ME/CFS, and long COVID is extremely important for us to all focus on. And he, in the ME Action event last week, he shared that this is because, and I knew this, but I really appreciated him saying this. He said, this is because right before the pandemic, a friend of mine handed me this book, and it was me, and I handed him this book that he had read right before all of this happened. And so he was primed with this story from somebody that he cared about, where he, as soon as he started hearing about long COVID, and I spoke to him about this as well, that's like what we were all saying, which is you got to get ready for this huge wave that's coming. So he was ready, and he didn't have a moment of doubt or disbelief, and was able to hit the ground running. And what he said in the ME Action event, which I thought was so important for all of us, is the reason he was able to do that is not because of me and that I'm special, it's because somebody shared their story, and that it is so important for us to make these invisible stories visible, whether it's in your Instagram or in a book or in a letter to the editor, or whatever it is to open a window onto your life, because so many of us are, it's not just the illness that's invisible, we're locked in our houses or stuck in our beds and nobody can see what's happening to us. And so writing, I think, can be a real way to advocate in a way that's not calling your senator, but really can make a big difference. So I just wanted to share that story.
That's so beautiful. That's an amazing personal connection. I'll just add that ME Action and Solve M.E both really had a theme of storytelling this month, and there's so many resources on both of the websites, and we'll put those in the chat. If you really want to learn more about crafting your story and the power of storytelling, check out those amazing workshops. One that we actually held here at the first Advocacy Cafe, which was a lot of fun. Art, I saw your hand go up too. Would you like to share and your origin story?
Yeah, thank you. I'm probably a very, very good example that anyone can become an advocate. I mean, I have a background in science. It's not in medicine or biology. I had never done any kind of advocacy or what you consider public service work. But I do have a family member who's had ME for quite a number of years. And I recall first, I was told about a demonstration in San Francisco in front of the HHS building. And so I just sort of went to it and met some people and basically said, well, I don't really know anything about this stuff, but I have a scientific background. If there's any way I can be useful, let me know. And it turned out really shortly after that, I ended up making use of that in terms of analyzing basically the shortfall of ME/CFS funding on a national scale. And then so I started getting involved. I really didn't really know that many people or that much about what was happening. But I started getting involved, and then one day another advocate told me how she had an appointment to meet with then Lieutenant Governor Newsom's staff in Sacramento, and was looking for people to come with her. So I volunteered, and that, I guess, marked the beginning of my California advocacy. And there came a point fairly early on where it was clear that we were not going to even get the simplest, most obvious things done by the state, that this was going to take a real effort. And I recall being told by somebody that, well, I'm going to have to either get legislation or get money. Neither one of them is going to be easy. And that sort of launched me on a path of getting involved with state legislators. So, this was a number of years ago. And where I am now is I've been involved in a major effort for state money in California for centers of excellence. And I'd say in the last few weeks, I've probably met with offices of 24 state legislators, with another one coming an hour from now and a few next week. So it's been a real, this is something I had absolutely zero experience on, zero. I didn't know anything about legislators, legislative aids, or anything. And so I just wanted to say that, even if you think you might not be able to do anything because you don't know the ropes or have no familiarity, that there are plenty of opportunities to learn, to get involved in something you haven't gotten involved in before. And there's plenty of people out here in the community who will help you. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Art. And with that, we'll transition to the second part of the program, where we'll engage in a conversation with everybody. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll close out.